We are getting ready to go. About 5 seconds. There you go.
Okay.
Okay. And then I'll drop off here. And you're going.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
great. All right, well, I'll call this meeting of the Board of Supervisors of Elections to order. It is now 7:02 on November 19th, 2020. And if we could have roll call for members.
All right, I'll start. Cliff Myers, present.
Brianna Cuffey, present.
And I'm here, Eileen Leahy as chair. And we have staff members present. Susan Eckert, who is the election associate, Regina Watkins Eldridge, city clerk, and then Ashley Leonard, who is the attorney from the Office of Law who's assigned to us. Let's go. We have a full meeting. I also want to welcome Joe Torrey and David Garris to our meeting, and we will
Welcome.
we will, after the minutes, be moving them up to the front so that we can get their input and their wisdom and then let them go on their merry way. So let's start with the approval of the minutes. Any changes, errors, additions?
I was okay with them as presented. Did anybody else note anything?
Yeah, I didn't catch anything either.
I didn't see anything, so.
All right. I moved to adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so moved. I just want to mention that this is an open meeting, and the board did receive 2 submissions from individuals who submitted some public testimony online on the topic of vote by mail, which is on the agenda tonight. Both will be available on the city's website, and the Board of Supervisors of Election members were sent those comments earlier today. Also of note is that both individuals opted out of providing live testimony this evening, but we will be looking at that if we haven't already. First up is election update, and we have Joe Torrey and David Garris of the Anne Arundel County State Board of Elections here this evening to help us in terms of giving feedback on their experience with vote by mail and the other changes that were made for both the primary and the general elections. And we will be using that information to help guide this board in terms of planning for the Annapolis 2021 elections, and also hopefully we'll be working with them on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe and David. Are they there?
There's David.
Yeah,
Joe.
There you
yep,
are.
there they are. Looks like Joe is muted right now.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Joe.
Good, good. So you wanted us to give, Dave and I'll tag team each other and give you an overview of what we did during the primary and general election.
Mhm.
As you know, due to COVID-19, the State Board of Elections, we had to go to vote by mail. So we encouraged a vote by mail. David sent you out earlier today a document. We encouraged vote by mail. We had mail in ballot drop boxes. We utilized vote centers instead of polling places. We used online election judge training resources. We did Zoom meetings with our election judges before we brought them in. Some of them we trained completely online. We streamed our canvas process. We didn't allow challengers and watchers in the building. And we had wait times on our website. And then we had signage of social distancing and wearing a mask and all PPE. We had sneeze guards in the polling places. I'm sure you all probably voted in this election, didn't you? Somewhere in Annapolis, or
Yes.
you saw what we did
Yep.
out there.
Right.
So we are here to help you and help we'll answer any questions you have. There was a difference between the primary and the general election where the state board just sent out ballots to every registered voter. And then in the general election, you had to send in an application to get a ballot, to receive a ballot. That was for an application to come in first and for our office to handle over 150,000 applications. It was very strenuous on the office. We worked from 7 in the morning till midnight almost every night trying to accommodate all of our voters. So it was very stressful. But we did it. So.
Plus, we would have the same situation in Annapolis, not to the degree that you did, in that different wards get different ballots. So we essentially have 8 ballots.
Yes, we had generally in a presidential general, we have 8 ballot styles. This time, the State Board of Elections wanted to get precinct results with vote centers. You know, a vote center, someone can come from all over the county and vote in a vote center because we have all the ballot styles. Right. We had to manage 195 ballot styles in each one of our 31 vote centers. It was, we spent $450,000 on delivery carts so we could organize them. We had 2 carts just with ballots in them. But it's manageable. You know, we know how to do it. Your election, I believe we pulled your numbers. You have about 33,000 registered voters there in Annapolis.
Right.
We have 405,000
yeah.
in the county.
Difference.
Yeah.
But
the drop boxes that we have, you know, you can use everything that we have, everything that what we had in the polling places, the sneeze guards, of course, our hand sanitizer, things that have expiration dates on them, we won't be using those. We're going to give those to. We discussed this with the state board today. All of my colleagues out at the 24 jurisdictions. Those supplies we're going to be giving to organizations within the county that need hand sanitizer and sprays and disinfectants because they have expiration dates on them.
Right. So I guess you're saying at least from the COVID standpoint, hopefully it will be a much different picture come September, November of 2021, but we should be prepared for having the protective equipment and sneeze guards and things like that in place so that we need them.
Correct. I would have a couple, have 2 options, your standard election and your vote by mail election and how you're going to handle it.
Okay. Now the vote by mail, what I'm used to hearing is vote by mail is technically you send out all the ballots to every registered voter and then they send them back. Now that's different than was done in the general election. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked, the 2 different ways that was handled?
Right. Well, and it was in April when COVID-19 hit. So we had a June election. So we had to turn this around around on a dime here and figure out what we were going to do. And when I say we, it's the state and the 24 local boards. So the decision was, since it was such a tight time frame, that was to just everybody that was registered, send them a ballot. Now, the problems that you may have heard of that we had with ballots going to dead people or going to the people didn't live there. Well, you all know, and we know, that if say your college student moves out of the house, they go to college, they never come back. Well, that parent still takes our mail and never tells us that they moved. So that's why, people were getting mail, or people moved out of a house was sold and we were never notified. So the ballots went there. And it wasn't a big problem, but a small problem in an election turns out to be a big problem with the media. So, or we have someone that passed away. We do get information from Department of Health If they die in state, we get the information. If they die out of state, we don't get, there's no reciprocity between the states, so we don't get the information.
Okay,
So some ballots did go to people that had passed away.
okay,
So when we moved to the general election, remember primary, we defaulted and just mailed everyone a ballot. So when we moved to the general election, the governor decided and the state board decided that we should get an application. So the application, then we wouldn't send out a ballot unless we received an application.
right. So that technically, I think by definition is different than vote by mail, or are you all considering it kind of the same thing?
It's still vote by mail, but you just had to request one.
Okay,
Yeah, you know, the legislature changed from absentee ballot to vote by mail. They changed the name of our absentee ballot, so we all use vote by mail now. They
Oh,
changed
okay.
the last legislative session. And to be honest with you, election officials want to move to vote by mail because we can't find enough election judges. We have 195 locations in the county. We can't, it's hard to recruit 3,000 election judges. And you know, right now, voter registration is when you go to motor vehicles to do a transaction, if you have to opt out of being registered to vote, right now, you automatically default to registration. You get registered. But,
okay.
Hey, Joe, this is Cliff.
mhm.
Did you all have any tracking of like return mail coming from all those pieces that you were sending out?
Yes, we could track. David, you want to tell them how we tracked it?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we did have statistics of all the ballots that were mailed. And once we receive the ballots back, we either check them into MD Voters, which is the voter registration system, the same day we receive it. We can mark whether or not we receive it from USPS via in person or from the drop boxes. If we did get yellow sticker mail back, the return mail, we do mark that as well. If we had a USPS sticker that had a new address on it, we would attempt to contact the voter to let them know that their ballot had been returned or the application had been returned to cure that if we could. So yeah, we were tracking that.
You know what the return mail percent was by any chance?
Not off the top of my head, but
Just
we can
curious.
find it.
Yeah, and Joe, when you're commenting about the the addresses, yeah, I sent a note out to the folks in our group this afternoon. But I mean, I see this every single day of the week in insurance, and every day policies come in the door. We're trying to verify who lives there, and I mean, it's completely nonstop. People
Yeah.
don't change their addresses when they move. And we go, I think John's in the household. No, he doesn't live here. He moved out 2 years ago. I said, well, he's still using the MVR address of your home. So, we are constantly trying to seek verification as to whether or not somebody we think lives there may or may not actually live in a particular house. So it's just kind of an endless thing. From a cost perspective, we all know that it's been difficult to secure, the legions of folks that are required to staff, precinct voting locations, and I really love, frankly, the voting centers personally. But in regard to looking at having to deal with over 100,000 returned ballots, let alone everything that was mailed, and the process flow to document and observe as those paper ballots are received. Do you all by any chance do anything in terms of just trying to track, what is the end game? What is the cost of that on a per ballot received basis? I mean, it almost seems to me that the per ballot received cost is certainly higher, at least the way I think it proceeded. Maybe you may not have to get the filling all the election judge spaces, but the manual power to process all those ballots. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it
Well,
would be more
actually-
expensive on a per ballot basis. What is your experience?
Well, actually, when you take a look at it, Cliff, what we spend the payroll for
The people,
election
yeah.
judges for a primary and a general is almost $1 million for anyone.
Hmm.
So when you look at what we spent for the vendor to mail out the ballots, because we didn't do it from our office, we don't have those capabilities.
Right.
But you look at the cost of the vendor and the cost of election judges, it's just about a wash between the two and the postage. Now, I don't have the exact cost, but the state board and the local boards are working on that
Mhm.
now. When we get our billing, we'll be able to give you a little bit more
Okay.
clear
Yeah,
picture.
with the mailed in ballots, I mean, I just, my very limited experience with, the process flow of opening up absentee ballots and having, two people at the table and observing what's really on that one and handling it. That's really what I was saying with 100,000 of those things, that the process, and were you following essentially that same process and over,
Yes.
yeah. So that's where my cost all was coming from. It's like,
Yeah.
holy cow.
Well, that's the canvas though,
Yeah.
essentially. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
guess
canvas-
my question would be, is that I know when we had spoken with Rockville and other municipalities,
Yeah.
they said that the cost of mailing was certainly higher, but what would you feel is the difference between sending out ballots to all registered voters, which is one procedure, as opposed to sending applications out and then having to, I mean, it's a two-step process. So I would think that would actually be more costly.
Yes, it is, because it's labor intensive.
Mhm.
We have to, sometimes we actually talked to the voter and walk them through filling out the application. But it is labor intensive. You have to get the application back, then we have to put it in the system. And then what would happen, we put it in the system, and then it would be sent, the state board would send that data to our mail house that would in turn mail the ballots.
Right.
So
So
the
if you
process,
if you
Yep,
sent
sorry.
all of the ballots directly out and say John Smith didn't live there anymore, my understanding is that the ballot then just is almost mute, but it's not a situation where somebody could just pick it up and send it back with filled out. Is that
Well,
correct?
yeah, I would suggest if you're gonna mail out ballots, and David and I talked about this early on before June. Delaware sends out a postcard to every one of their voters right before the election,
Mhm,
find out if they have the correct address.
mhm.
So maybe that's something that you would want to do.
I think that's what they did in Rockville.
Yeah, to send out a postcard, because it probably clean up 90% of your addresses. Although the State Board of Elections, David, what's that organization that we have that the State Board of Elections?
Eric,
About Eric.
Electronic Registration Information Center.
Yeah, the Electronic Registration Information Center. We get, what is it, 32 states now, Dave? 30?
Mm-hmm.
So we get information from their motor vehicles when someone moves. We get information if someone passed away in those states. And also we get, so what is it, the motor vehicles, we get it from the health departments.
Yeah, DHMH.
Yeah, so we get all this data. We do it every 3 months. Every 3 months we get this data and we scrub our records and look at the problem we had in the primary. This is, people just move. Their mobiles, you said, Cliff, it's tough sometimes. Because when we send out our specimen ballots, we have 405,000 specimen. Well, you don't send a specimen ballot to someone that has a vote by mail ballot. But when we send those out, we always get 10% of our mail back, 8 to 10% of our mail back. So,
And that's on when you send the ballots versus the applications, or just?
yeah, no, that's anytime we do a mailing.
Okay.
Anytime we do a mailing, we get 10% back. And what I was explaining, Eileen, is that although we jump through all these hoops to keep our records clean, we still get 10% back.
Right.
And
Okay.
when the press hears that you sent someone If someone calls, you sent my mother a ballot. She died 2 years ago. Well, you didn't tell us.
Right, and that's not fraudulent unless he filled it out.
No, right.
There's,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Cliff, I'm sorry, you had a question?
um, two quick follow-ups. One was, of course, when in the general with the sending out of the applications, and then following up the mailing of the ballots. So when those applications came in the door, and I know, with 100,000 of those coming in, my hat's off to you and your team. To give you a little bit of kudos, when folks talk about boards of elections across the country, and sometimes they talk about them scurrilously, that's because they haven't been in your shop.
Right.
From what I've seen of your
Mhm.
shop, there's nothing scurrilous whatsoever about the way you run your operation. So
Mhm.
congratulations on getting through it.
We have about 5 minutes left, so if we
All
can
right.
focus-
Enough of my grandstanding.
Right.
So
Well,
the
if we can
question,
focus on how this might,
focus on the question. So
we'll focus on the city of Annapolis
Well,
and
so-
what we need to be thinking
So
about doing.
when you verify, so the process of verifying those applications that came in, what did you all go through?
Well, what we do, we had to mail it out to them. So they
Right.
qualified them right away. Then when we sent it back, we just entered in that we received one. We changed their address if they changed their address. We changed their party if they changed their party. And then we
No,
sent
I
that-
guess maybe I misunderstood. So we mail out the applications
Yes.
because we did to everybody. And then 40% of those folks actually mailed them back in and said, hey, I do want this.
Yeah.
So when you got those requests from folks to say, yes, I will vote by mail, send me my ballot. When you got that application request in, did you go through an additional process to verify that those requests that you received were indeed from verified voters?
No, we do not. You might be thinking about the 5 states that do vote by mail have signature verification tools now. It's algorithms that checks that. We're looking into that to move forward with signature verification to verify. No, so we didn't call the voter. They called in or sent a request. We sent the application out. So there's nothing that we did to
Okay.
qualify them.
And my last question is just kind of curious if anybody has commented on, because one other thing that's come up, and we in the city decided, in fact, I was very much in favor of this, said it didn't make any sense to have the cutoff date the day after the election to get mail in if you're going to say you can mail it on the day of election. So we, passed an ordinance a couple of years back that said, hey, you've got a week to be able to get that ballot back. And I think the county is actually a little bit longer. Given what's happened, having now hundreds of thousands of these things sent back in, have you heard anything about pushback in terms of a date to consider the election done?
No, we kept our second Friday after the election. That's
Okay. And
Right.
no,
And I
you haven't
think-
heard anything?
Right, but I think in terms of Annapolis, I would think that keeping it the way we've just done it should be sufficient time. 'cause we're not dealing with
Yeah,
that.
I agree. Just didn't know whether or not anybody's heard any rumblings of people saying, nope, the election date should be the Tuesday of the election and do away with this
Right.
grace period.
Okay,
That's
well,
all.
Well, we'll
Just
let you
curious.
know, the state board did change a lot of regulations so we could do a vote by mail.
Yep. Okay.
Because
Thanks.
we started
Are
counting
those-
ballots in October. October
Oh.
1st, we started counting ballots. And if you do a vote by mail election, you have to know this. You board members are going to spend a lot of time looking at ballots. We did it virtually, and that's what we would like to do with you if this pandemic is still like it is today, or it's still out there. You would have to actually look at our ballot. What we do, we did it with a camera, and we so we had voter intent problems once we opened the ballot.
Right.
We put the camera up and showed it to you. And
mhm, okay.
not to say that you can't be in
Right.
the office, but whatever
Right.
you decide, we'll help you with your processes, your procedures. And David and I are available for any questions as you move forward.
Okay. You mentioned the new regulations. Is that something that you can send to us or give us a link that we can go look those up and make sure that we follow those?
Well, David and
those
I'll
up.
give you a list of the few regulations that they changed. Like they changed when we could start counting ballots, and there
Right.
were 5 or
Right.
6 other regulations
Yeah.
that we changed. So we could
Thanks.
adjust.
That's kind of where I was going
Yeah.
partly, Eileen.
Now, one
Thanks.
other Quick question. If someone didn't sign their signature line, how
Yeah,
is
if they
it
did-
handled?
Yeah. Okay, we called the voter and asked them to come in. And
Okay,
we took a picture that we copied the back of their envelope and we emailed it to them, said, if you can sign the back of it, sign it, send it in.
okay,
And we counted the ballot. We did everything we could to have someone's ballot count. We bent
Right.
over backwards. We did things that we never do. But
right,
since it was a vote by mail, it's like David was mentioning earlier, if we got a ballot back, it was undeliverable. We called the voter if we had a phone number for them. Mostly we have cell phone numbers now, or we sent them a letter. It was either or both, and said, "Hey, your ballot was returned. We want to get you a ballot." And 90% of the people answered and said, "Oh, gee, thanks. I'm glad you did that." So we
all right.
will take care of the voter.
Okay, any questions? Does Ashley have a question? Ashley or Brianna? Regina?
Not here.
Okay.
I
we'll
think
just-
Regina still needs to be let back in.
Okay,
No questions. I'm just fiddling with my headphones.
okay. Well, just to kind of summarize, it looks like overall it was a positive experience. Certainly looking at the information you sent us later today, it looks like turnout was much higher.
Yeah. We had
But
about a 73% turnout.
73%?
Yeah, we threw the
Yeah.
kitchen sink at it and we survived.
Right, right. So I think what we need to do as a board is we'll be taking this under consideration, maybe having a work session with the city council and making a decision rather soon.
Yeah, let's hope that COVID-19, they get the vaccine out and things look better by the time September of next year.
Right, right. Well, the priorities, I guess, for us is to see how it applies to our city code and any legislation that needs to be changed. And then, of course, looking at cost and doing outreach. I think that the fact that we've been through it already will help us a lot, that people are somewhat familiar. There are some things that we need to look at, I believe, in city code, and I'll check with Ashley on this in terms of definitions of polling places versus polling centers and what will drop boxes count as, because right now I believe our city code says that we have to have a polling place in every ward. And precincts can be put together, but we have had some concern expressed in the past by alderpersons that that can be confusing to longtime voters and some other things like that. So certainly we're dealing on a much smaller scale, but have a lot of the same kind of challenges.
I think, Eileen, if I may, real quick on that point, part of that might be that, oftentimes it wasn't with the election centers where it didn't matter where you're coming from, you could vote there. In the past, so if it's changing, it was still limited. Well, you're supposed to vote in Ward 2. You need to go over here, versus a place where it wouldn't matter what ward you happen or precinct you're coming from, which might maybe mitigate some of that concern.
Right.
And
we'll see.
and
And
we
Yeah.
did, Eileen, we actually put signs up at every 195 of our locations, because we used all the high schools this time. So we had large venues that we could get their input and output. But we did put signs up at every one, said, "Hey, this is not a vote center. This isn't your polling place today."
Right.
And we put the list of vote centers there with directions or how they could get there.
Right. Well, I think the reality, though, is a lot of people use the drop boxes. And we're
Yep,
calling this
yep.
vote by mail, but in many cases it was vote by drop.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, the Pitt Moyer Center was perfect.
Mhm.
That was our most active Dropbox, by the way, and also for voters. So it
Mhm.
worked perfect. It was really good.
Okay,
Well,
great.
listen, it was good seeing you all, and we look
Well-
forward to working with you next year.
Thank you so much. And I think we're
Yeah.
going to shoot for a January meeting to go over the MOU. Does that sound good?
Well, we're not, yeah, that sounds good. We were going to get back to you, yep, in January.
Okay, all right. That'd be great. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, well, we could go on and discuss some of this, but we're already at 7:30. So
It's my fault.
No, it isn't. We all have good questions and we have more questions. So I'm proposing that we kind of get a chance to review notes from tonight, look at some of the information that we just got today. And discuss it and make a decision in December. How does that sound? Regina?
I was just going to remind you of our conversation earlier today with Ashley's things.
Yes, we're going to do that next. Okay. So, so as long as, are you okay with that, Brianna and Cliff?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's fine by
so
me.
we'll get some things out, and then I'll look into also if we need to do a work, Regina and I talked about maybe having a work session with the city council too. So we're gonna move forward so that we can get Ashley on the agenda a little faster and have her talk to us about independent expenditures. And to give a little bit of background, I think you all knew that Alderman, we had been given notice that Alderman Savage was considering putting forth some legislation in regards to banning developers from making contributions. That had been something that had been passed in the county and actually had to get approval through the state, but hasn't been enacted. In talking with Jared DeMaranis, he felt that that you can do bans, but that he felt that disclosures are a little bit easier to enforce and can provide some consistency so that it's actually including people. It's a little bit more of a fair playing field and not just developers, because then you have to define developers. Is a plumber a developer? Is a real estate investor a developer? So anyway, his final thing was you really need to do independent expenditures, which has been on our agenda. And so it seemed like a good time to really kind of ramp that discussion up. And so I'm going to send it over to Ashley.
I don't think it would be that hard. It's literally just one one section of state code that we would have to modify and not that much, and tweak it and put it into our code. The most challenging part would just be to make sure that the definitions all line up, because the state code uses slightly different definitions for things, but
Right.
I don't think it would be that hard to do. Next step would be I would just have Jacqueline Lee and the law office do a draft ordinance. I would double check all the definitions and things like that. And then we would send it to you to see if you wanted to change. The only thing you'd probably maybe want to look at is the limits, the
They're
dollar
high.
amount limits.
Right. They're like $5,000.
5 and 10. Yeah.
Yeah, everything else is fairly cut and dry about what you put in the reports and who you report it. None of that. I mean, I would change that consistently over to like city versus state. But the only thing that's really substantive that you guys would probably need to focus on are those dollar amounts as to whether they would work for the city or they're too high, too low.
And I have to say,
how many reports do you guys want to get, I guess is the question.
And I was reading through that. I don't know if there's any way you could write it. It might be slightly more clear than the way it is in the state code in terms of when the reporting takes place. I kept reading through it and going like, is that sentence the same as the next one, or is it a little bit different? There's a little bit of that, but
we can definitely do some cleanup.
Yeah.
It's not that long of a statute, so we can definitely do some cleanup.
Okay.
No offense to the state legislators if they're listening.
Ashley, would it be feasible for that to be on our agenda for December, or do you need more time?
Yeah, no, that should be fine.
Right.
I mean, on different news, which is slightly off basis, is Alderman Payon is still chugging along with his nonpartisan legislation. It's not finalized yet because he has to figure out, because there's a charter amendment for how they would have to figure out how to fill vacancies that are less than 15 months out, because that's done by Central Committee, and he hasn't made a decision as to how he wants to proceed on that. That is a fairly lengthy piece of legislation. It's about 30 some pages because you have to remove everything related to Central Committee's partisan.
And so
language.
This has already started, and this hasn't been anything that's come to elections yet.
No, it's still in draft phase. Alderman Payon still hasn't made critical decisions. I think it easily could be on the agenda for December, but I can send it to you in advance so you can look at the 30 some pages in advance. I can also send you a red line version that sort of shows you, but I mean, it is a fairly extensive overhaul of our code section because partisan stuff is sprinkled everywhere.
Correct. However, as we've talked about on a number of occasions with the city council, is that we have requested that there not be any changes in legislation in an election year.
Yes.
There's actually been talk about a ballot question being put on for deciding about this rather than having it introduced through legislation. So I'm actually quite surprised to hear that it's this far down.
I'm not sure we would have an effective date for this coming election. That's still a conversation that we're having, the city attorney and Alderman Panning to have, is that he can push this through now if he's really intent on it, but that doesn't mean we'll make it apply to the 2021 election.
Correct, but the Charter Commission is meeting and is going to be discussing not only nonpartisan, but also the timing of the elections and a number of other things. And again, we have asked the city council to please consult with us and also to not introduce things concerning elections during an election year, even if they apply later, because there's other things that are in play. I mean, might be introduced into the Maryland legislature again.
I know, and I'm pretty sure Regina had extensive conversations with him about this, but
Regina, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, actually, I talked to Fred and I said, Fred, the Charter Revision Commission will be starting in January. If that's your request, just forward your information to them and let them deal with it. Because we're going to be talking about partisan elections, why our elections going on. That is going to be very confusing to the citizens.
Yeah, and it's not even if it does take place in a subsequent election, it's going to be chatter now, and then be confusing. And one of the things in terms of when we looked at, and I won't get into it too much in terms of nonpartisan, is and maybe he's thought of this, is how do you deal with when there's 5 people applying for one position and nobody gets a majority? So it's not as simple as just not putting D's and R's next to people's names. There is a lot of, as you said, a lot of code that goes along with it. So I would if it's appropriate for us to see it, I think that would be helpful. I'd also ask Alderman Payon to please talk to us about it.
Yeah, I will remind him of it. I was a little surprised. He randomly popped down in my office again and said, nope, I still want to move on this.
Well, when I last emailed him asking him about it, I didn't get a reply. So I thought it was kind of bad. So anyway, okay. Well, we'll follow up with that. If you can follow up with superintendent expenditure. And I guess Brianna and Cliff, we need to look at the limits and also the number of reports. Anything else?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything else pending legislative wise.
Okay.
So when we talk about the number of reports, that seemed to suggest that 48 hours after something happens, you need to do something. Is that what you're kind of talking about in terms of how frequently we want to get reports?
I mean, because you guys are going to be receiving these reports. So ideally, what do you think you guys can handle and manage? And it might not be the same volume.
And what are these reports?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think at least initially you can always up these as an amendment down the road, but as we're sort of branching into this new area of reporting, I don't want the board to get overwhelmed with
whether, is there any way that the legislation can be written in such a way that, a minimum number or at least something that gives some flexibility maybe to the board that it could require more if it, I don't know, some way to.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. I mean, we don't have to. I'm just using the state as sort of a base thing, so we're not reinventing the wheel. But that doesn't mean we can't tweak it to make it, work for you guys.
Right. And on a form as prescribed by the board.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Since we have you, Ashley, if we, I'm just going to jump ahead. I think we're jumping all over the agenda, but we'll get to it all. I had asked you for any feedback in terms of Alderman Gay's request today concerning his fee.
I mean, I'm trying to think. He's essentially doing a hardship request, is what it came down to. I mean, I still think, regardless of the fee, he should be getting his amended, corrected report in. And then you talk with the fee. The only thing I would say is that if you're going to start entertaining hardship requests, then we need to sort of set some basic guidelines so that we're not like cherry picking. I mean, the worst that can happen is he doesn't pay, which he says he can't, and it would keep incurring.
Well, he's already maxed out, so.
Yeah, so he's already maxed. So there's not much we can do at this point anyway, unless you want to pursue it in some other enforcement.
Well, my understanding from a report from somebody who had talked to him today, not Regina, was that he was dropping off his amended report and giving a partial payment and asking for a chance to give it over time. The letter didn't reflect that.
No, it did
No.
not. When I read it, I didn't get that impression. I mean, I think we can acknowledge the letter, say, you know, I mean, he's already maxed out. You're willing to give him a grace period since he's at the maximum limit anyway till X date. Or before you send that letter, maybe have a conversation with him about when he realistically thinks he could pay it.
Okay.
And remind him, of course, that all this is going to have to be resolved before, if he plans to run again in 2021. Because we don't want to repeat.
Right, and this is not the first time. Pretty much every reporting period, there's a late report, and he has maxed to other levels too. But Brianna and Cliff, what are your thoughts?
I was just trying to look up the code real quick. I meant to do this beforehand, so actually you may have looked at it, but
Brianna, were you going to say something while Cliff looks that up?
yeah.
Yeah, I think having a conversation with him about when he realistically thinks he can pay it, I am fine with the grace period, depending on how long it is.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've given a lot of grace. But I mean, I guess also with that conversation, kind of thinking of when stuff will really start to ramp up as far as election goes, you know, people filing and everything like that. So I feel like it wouldn't be, I feel like it'd be graceful enough to give him like 60 or 90 days, because come like February, stuff will start moving.
So that's what I was looking for. I know it's in here, but actually the reference to hardship.
There's a hardship for fees, I believe, in terms of candidates, but I don't think there's a hardship necessarily for other payments.
That might
I'm
be.
not sure.
Yeah, I think
That
she might
might
be
be it.
right.
Yeah, I think it's just that. How about if we I'll give him a call, send a letter and just say, you know, we've already given the deadline for the amended report, which I believe is the 25th.
The 25th.
The 25th.
From 25th.
Get it in by the 25th and at least make monthly payments with the hope that it gets paid within 6 months. Is that reasonable?
Yeah,
What's
I mean,
So
what's the max for the fee again? Is it 250?
it's 250. He's already maxed out.
yeah. I mean,
He
The
maxed
alternative
out
is-
this time.
I mean, is to, I don't know, to take more serious enforcement against him. But if we could get him on a payment plan, I know we do that for other things in the city, like late water bills and similar. So there is a precedent for hardship and payment plans.
Mhm. All right, well,
I feel like 3 months is enough, again, with me in the 60 or 90 days, because that's still less than $100 a month.
okay. Cliff, your thoughts?
I'm comfortable with that.
And it kind of puts him in the clear where
Yeah.
if he's going to run again, he's going to want to have his paperwork and stuff into us in the
And done.
beginning of spring and when the
Yeah.
when the
So
weather
we'll
breaks and stuff.
write
so.
him a letter, and I'll also give him a call saying that we've received his letter. Remind him that the amended report is due November 25th. And how about if we receive that report, then we will move ahead with giving him 3 months to pay his $250 or not make it contingent.
Wait, say that again?
Well, do we want to say it has to be about if you want to have a payment plan, you need to get your amended report in? I mean, you could make it contingent on one. It doesn't really probably change anything in the long run.
I mean, if he intends to make a partial payment with it anyway, then
Okay, so we'll ask him for some partial
Yeah.
payment with the report.
Yeah, I mean, if he intends to make a partial payment anyway with turning it in, then I don't see why not, just
Okay.
go ahead and link them together.
Okay. All right, Cliff?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we've had a few other folks that did owe us some fees, and Rodriguez has paid us what he owed on his, and I know that a couple of other candidates from the last election have paid their requisite late fees. So we didn't have to get to this particular point, but going to Ashley's brief comment perhaps is we need to be, whatever we do, we're gonna have to be sure we extend the same approach and consistency toward anybody else if they are not paying it timely, but they at least come to us. In the past, the problem has been they don't respond. At least between non-response for those who come and say, I know I owe it, I have intentions of paying it, and
Yeah. Susan, are you in the office tomorrow? Regina, would it be okay if Susan looked into to see if there was any city policy as far as hardship and also payment plans so that we're consistent with the rest of the city?
Yes, ma'am.
So if we could do that, and then I could get a letter out to him asking for the amended report by the 25th with some partial payment, and then give him any information that we can get from the city. Because I think the point is we should be consistent with other options that the city provides for people that owe them money.
Okay.
All right, that sounds good. All right, anything else on that front? Thank you, Ashley. All right, since we're kind of already.
I'll hang around. I just got to put the kiddo into bed in a minute. So.
All right. So while we're in that section of campaign fund report review, I think, Cliff, if you can give us a brief update on who is still outstanding.
So yeah, I think what's going to happen is we're going to be reconfirming, I think, tomorrow and Monday. It looked like I couldn't quite tell if we had new reports in on a couple folks. We had the ARCC had to do an amended Schedule 1 for aggregate totals. Alderman Payone's campaign. I don't know if we've seen that. We did have a conversation by email where they were asking for clarification on what the begin and end dates were. I replied to them, but it doesn't appear to me as if they have yet filed that. They do have until the 25th, to get their amended report in with, again, Schedule 1 and the aggregate totals.
So everybody that had a question, you were able to get back to them?
Yeah, I did. I got back in one regard to Alderwoman Finlayson, but then when I first tried to call back her treasurer, we didn't touch base, and I have not been able to reach out to her since then, because I have a sense she may have had a different question as well, but they have not asked me by email what that other question may have been.
Could you possibly reach out to her again tomorrow?
I'll try again. Yeah, I've just have not been able to do that.
Who's treasurer?
Alderwoman
Faye Curry.
Yeah, Faye Curry, right.
I can text her. Just let me know and ask her.
Yeah, and she apparently had another question, and I don't know what it was, but they had not relayed it by email.
Okay. Well, if we could send out a reminder to all of the people that have outstanding reports, if we can send that email out tomorrow.
Yeah, it might be even if it could even be generic without looking at who's. You say, if you have not replied yet, please, respond with your corrected reports if you have not done so already, or payment of fees. There are a couple of folks who owed us $20.
Regina? Is that good with you, Regina? She's not. I can't hear you.
Looks like she said yes, but I can't.
All right, she's smiling.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I sent an email out, and it kind of was early evening, and said I've gone through everything.
I saw that.
And it's kind of sitting on my desk, so I can send like a status update to what I have received, and send reminders out to everybody who has still outstanding item, and say, we don't have, like you said, we don't have to be specific. Just
right.
If I have time, I could be specific and address each person individually, but we'll just see.
All right, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, Susan, let's go back up to election office status and kind of get a little report from you, or a big report.
What kind of report do you
Well, just-
want? I
mean,
didn't
you
know what
kind of-
that meant.
What's going on in your
I don't
office?
know what you've been, we know kind of what you've been doing, but how's it going in the election office, the pulse of the,
It's going well. I mean, as far as when I saw that on the agenda, I thought it meant like the office build out thing that they were talking about doing. And I don't know anything about that. So,
okay. It
I
can
still
mean
think-
anything we want it to mean.
yeah.
Okay.
The conference room, yeah, I'm still working in the conference room. I think it's going fine. I received from Brianna, this is kind of jumping ahead to the manual, which I'm just
Mhm.
starting now to pull something together based on what she sent me and what I kind of have in my head.
Okay.
There hasn't been anything. I was actually really kind of, I wouldn't say I was busy, but during the presidential election, our office got quite a few phone calls about, how do I get my ballot? I'm at Eastport Fire Department and there's no poll, there's nobody here. Where do I go vote? You know,
Right.
and all kinds of stuff like that. And that's pretty much died down. We have one person who's expressed an interest in running for alderperson
Okay.
in 2021. I've provided her with information, but finally, you know, it's
If you could keep just a running tally of those sorts of things that you do, which will help us in terms of putting together some data
Mhm.
to hand off to the next board so that they have the data to kind of, I'm losing the word, to kind of just give information for why we need to have a person like you on board.
I have that. I keep like a to-do list, and it's
Mhm.
just like a running to-do list. And when something's done, it says done, and then
Right,
I
well,
add
just
to
things like how many phone calls you got, how many packets you sent out. That sort of thing would be very
Okay.
helpful. I think for justifying is the word I'm looking for, justifying the position.
Okay.
Are you good with that, Regina? Gonna keep it going.
Okay.
So, great. Yeah, and I mean, when I talk about the election office status, it's really just kind of getting a feel for what the calls are coming in, and different things like that, any inquiries. And then the candidate manual, we can maybe look at getting that out maybe January.
That's possible. I actually, it's very reasonable. Like I said, I've just, oh, go ahead, Regina.
Regina,
I didn't even hear what she said.
I said, are we looking at maybe having the candidate manual for us to look at in January? Would that be
Oh.
reasonable?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you. Good job. Anything to add, Regina?
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm having power surges. I live in Glen Burnie on the grid with the hospital.
Oh,
So it
gee.
just keeps jumping all around. But we are doing a great job. Susan is doing an excellent job. And we've been working on everything that you've assigned us. I mean, Brianna, thank you for your manual draft. We appreciate it. But as for right now, we've updated everything on our website that we could do. And we're waiting for feedback from the county regarding their MOU and our calendar that we sent over, because I'm pretty sure they may have some edits we need to make. So once that's done, I think our website will be pretty complete.
Okay. Anything on your end, Brianna?
Question, do we have, and I'm blanking because I feel like I may have seen it or not on the website. Do we have anything about the digital submission of campaign finance reports, like emailing it to the elections email address and that kind of thing? Or are we not that far yet?
We have a fill-inable form, but it doesn't automatically shoot to us. You can print it, you can fill it in, print it, and send it to us.
Okay.
Is there a
I
way
don't
to
know.
have it so it can just be submitted to us?
That was Cliff was working on that with someone in MIT, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I feel like them being
I know
able
what
to fill it in, save it, and then email it is fine.
Fine.
Okay. All right.
That, and I think I honestly kind of prefer that because
Well, they
there's
have to-
also an
they have to-
aspect of responsibility. of
sign
Well,
it.
they have to sign it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that takes care of that, so, okay, great. All
Hey,
right.
but real quick before we go off the website comment, I noted today again. So Susan, just want to, just another little item for the checklist, but noted a couple other attachments of campaign reports that had counting information in it. So it might be a little tedious. Just click, look, click, look, click, look to find the ones that are there and
Lot of-
pull them off. Yeah.
There's,
Or
actually, there's duplicates. There's ones that were
yes.
uploaded with
Mhm.
their account information not redacted.
Right, and then the one,
Ones with redacted. So I
Right.
have to get in touch with Inna and say, remove this, and
Yeah.
this. And then take
Great.
what has come in since then, redact the account information, send that to her for posting.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, well, moving along, so review election forms. I have a confession to make. I hadn't really looked at them until today. And I've got a bunch of stuff on there for potential edits. I don't know if anybody else had a chance to look at it.
Well, why don't you just send them to us?
Well, if I can, I could just send them to you or give Susan a call. Mostly it's just, it's mostly the Challenger and Watcher form, which I know you guys have put on this agenda and I just haven't looked at it until now. I
Mhm.
saw the additions that were on there, which were good, but some of it's redundant and some of it just needs, I think, consistency. Are we going to use the word review or are we going to use the word read? That kind of a thing would be a question. So,
I just kind of threw that together because we had talked about it. And
Mhm.
so I thought, let me just come up with something.
no, that's perfect because it made me look at it. So we can look at it tonight if you want, or Cliff and Brianna, if you want to take a closer look at it and send some comments to Susan. I think we could get it so
Yeah.
that we can just vote on it and be done with it in December.
Yeah, I browsed through it, but I did not read it tightly. The affidavit looked to me. What did you see on the affidavit as you glanced at it, or not really prepared
You
to
know,
comment on it?
It's little things. And again, this may not be a big deal
Right.
or it may not be a thing for like Susan and Regina, but like having people print their names and not just sign them because we've had problems with what are their names. It's some additions like that.
Let's see.
Um,
Affidavit.
I'm looking to see if I have it in front of me.
Oh
So,
yeah, like on
certificate-
certification, it only
You're
Yeah,
talking
says
about
and
the
also-
certificate of candidacy?
Like on the certificate of candidacy, it's some things like, you know,
that's a good point. It's all
Cell nu-
signatures.
you
Yeah.
know, print, cell numbers, is that your primary number? You know, we
Yep.
have a name of an organization, but we don't include contact information for the organization. Or who is the person to contact for that? Another question I had, we don't really talk about what kind of organizations. That's another discussion for another
Yeah.
day.
Well, what we
Um,
did on this was to make it very clear that you needed the first three sections, but we really didn't edit
The rest
the
of it.
guts of some of it. Yeah.
Right. You know, and another question I had was, is there enough room for the notary stamp? That may or may not need to be in there, but it was
Oh.
mostly adding print or type for information. Also at the bottom, we tried really hard to change close of business and give people actual time. So that would be one thing. And then on the other form, the Challenger and Watcher form was again, some of that same type of thing. Printing,
Well, we did have name of Challenger and Watcher printed and then a signature. But yeah, the candidate is just a signature and not a name.
right. And
Hopefully
there's
we
some
know who it is.
right. And I like having the code on the back, but it's somewhat
Mhm.
redundant with the bottom two.
I
two,
agree.
The
Yeah.
bottom two paragraphs. The
Yeah.
other thing that it brought up to me is, do we, and again, this would be checking with the state board. Do we need to get the challenger's contact information? We may not. I mean, I don't know what we would necessarily do with it. I don't want to, but again, you know, we did have in the last election, somebody who was a challenger that had, you know, had a complaint and we really had a hard time tracking that person down. So I don't know. I don't know if that might be even a no-no as far as asking for that, but that kind of thing just came up. So I can give these edits to you, and I'll send them out to everybody, but give them to Susan and Regina.
Mhm.
The
Eileen,
other
I
thing-
think having the challengers watchers information would be a good thing because of the situation that you had at the American Legion.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then
So-
you'll be able to contact that person after the fact and resolve those issues. Yeah,
Because we had to go through a couple of people to get that information.
Right.
So
we sure did.
the other thing I also thought it might be worthwhile to include on the challengers and watchers certificate is that it may change if we have COVID. COVID
Right.
restrictions may change the people, we have, I think we should put in some, and again, that would be a question for Ashley. Can we put some sort of disclosure in there? Or you
She
might.
put- They had, remember the disclosure that we talked about at the last meeting to put on the top of some of our applications? It should be on all of them. The state of emergency, COVID situation may cause for changes in the forms.
Okay. I think
Yeah,
that's
something
something to have.
Basic, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if we have to limit the number of people, or if we have to make it virtual, we want to at least have that up front. So,
Mhm.
so anyway, so if we can all take a look at that, and I'll send you mine.
Did the county
did-
did the county say anything regarding the challengers and watchers during this election with the paper? I mean, was it people out watching the boxes or anything like that on election day?
I don't know. I know the boxes were monitored 24/7, but they
Yeah.
didn't mention anything about, I think they talked mostly about the canvas was done virtually.
Yeah, and how did they handle at the, the election centers,
Mhm.
challengers and watchers?
Yeah, so that would be a good
Right.
question. How do you limit that sort of thing? So we may have to look into that.
I feel like he mentioned one thing of how they didn't. Wait a minute. I think I typed it. And I can't remember whether it was primary or general, but he said no challengers or watchers were allowed in the building.
Yeah, I think
okay.
I thought that was in reference to the canvas. I thought
That was the
that they
case.
That's
he
what I
did
thought
not-
was the canvas.
Okay.
normally they're allowed in, and this time they just they had the camera and
Okay,
they'd show to whoever was watching.
Right. Well, maybe
Yeah.
Sharon, Susan, if you can have on your to-do list, maybe just check with Joe and David about that.
What am I checking with them about?
Just were there any changes in how they handled challengers and watchers at
Oh, okay,
At election
in person
sites.
at the election
site.
sites for the voting centers?
okay.
And also, I think that's a good question, Cliff. What about boxes? Are you going to keep, is there a perimeter to a box in terms of people putting signs up and things like that? I don't know. Regina, have you heard anything about that?
I think that they still were using the 100 feet, no electioneering.
But is that
Hmm.
included in a drop box?
I don't know.
You
100.
could theoretically, I guess, have somebody standing next to a drop box.
Yeah.
Wasn't nobody standing next to drop boxes when I went to them.
Really
Aside from
was.
like the county police every so often.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I yelled at all my old people and I was like, I will drop it off. You will stay home,
Right.
away from everyone in the outside.
Well, it's just something to think about in terms of, we've had issues in our special election and in our previous election with people with the 100 feet perimeter.
Yep.
Unless we kind of it's just something to think about or anticipate, but and that might be something we have to talk about when we look at the status of drop boxes, if they're going to count as polling places, because if they count as a polling place, then I guess the perimeter.
Would be 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
100 feet or
100
whatever.
feet.
Yeah.
So,
But we could add that question to the email that Susan's going to send tomorrow.
okay, that's a great idea.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else?
Mhm.
A lot we got done tonight. And I know we have lots of other questions. So that was great that Joe and
Yeah.
David came.
Yep.
So, Let me double check the agenda. I think we've hit all our items.
Yeah, because we talked about political action committees, which will now be independent expenditures instead earlier.
Right. And we still need to send that letter to the Coalition of Black Progressives, but there's no report coming up looming anytime soon. So I know Susan has looked into their addresses. So we can, we'll look at how we're going to address all the PACs.
Oh, I know what I wanted to tell you.
Uh-huh.
I contacted OEM regarding the upcoming election and supplies like gloves, hand sanitizer, masks, and all those things related. And Kevin said he was going to look into it and start, if we need those kind of things, just
Stockpiling.
get it. Yeah.
No.
He said,
Well,
yeah.
and if he can check also with Joe, because he mentioned that whatever they have that hasn't expired, we could use.
Yeah, I had an email. I'm not sure if I sent it to you guys. Joe replied to that question about COVID and the extra items they needed, and I have that. I can forward that email to you guys. So I
Okay.
forwarded it to Kevin,
Okay,
just
great.
so he would know what to look for.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, and I imagine Dan from from Glen Burnie's, from the state board, would be on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I guess my dreams of not having a December meeting have been dashed.
It could be a quick one though.
It could be. So any questions, comments, additions? I don't know, was Alderman Savage able to join us this evening? I don't know if he has anything he
I feel
wants
like
to.
Eric never said anything.
No, he did not show up.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
He may be looking at this later then, so. All right, well, if we don't have anything else on the agenda, we've done candidates and political, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 20:08.
Second.
All in favor?